Hello， 大家好，欢迎回到外媒看中国，我是安博然。In massive news this afternoon, China and the US issued a joint statement following their two-day meeting in Switzerland over the weekend, which effectively cut tariffs on Chinese goods imported to the United States to 30% and tariffs on US goods imported to China to 10% for 90 days. But some people are confused as to why China would agree to still being tariffed 30%, while the US is only taxed 10%, with many saying that China lost face and ended up walking away with an unfair deal. In this video, I'll briefly explain why the reality is actually completely the opposite, and how China actually got everything they asked for. Today, we'll go beyond the propaganda. This is Reports on China. I'm Andy Boreham here in Shanghai. Let's get reporting. This afternoon, China and the United States released a joint statement that shocked many analysts following a weekend of intense talks in Geneva, Switzerland, between the Chinese team, headed by Premier He Lifeng, and the US team, headed by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. The statement basically slashed tariffs on both sides by 115%, leaving US tariffs on Chinese goods at 30% and Chinese tariffs on US goods at 10%. But many people are confused about why those numbers aren't even, with some going as far as to say that China appears to have lost this round of talks, having agreed to an unfair deal. That is actually not true, and I'll explain why. Firstly, if we want to stay fair and reasonable, which China has been during this whole tariff war, we need to take Beijing's advice and avoid viewing this as a zero-sum game. Like Beijing has said continuously, there are no winners in a trade war, only losers. So I'll try to refrain from saying that China won, but if you want to come to that conclusion yourself from the information I'm about to share, then so be it. Basically, China got everything they asked for of the Trump administration with these talks, which was a cancellation of all of Trump's unfair Liberation Day tariffs levied against China starting on April 2, before they would agree to enter tariff negotiations. And guess what? That is exactly what China got. Trump's team, including Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and US Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, agreed to that demand and removed all US tariffs on Chinese imports back to April 2nd. And China then agreed to the exact same thing. So why are Chinese goods still being taxed 30% while US goods imported to China are only taxed 10%? Well, exactly because of what I said above. Before Trump's Liberation Day tariff tantrums began on April 2, that is exactly where the tariff levels sat, 30% and 10%. The extra 20% tariff on Chinese goods imported to the US comes from two separate tariffs Trump leveled against China at 10% a pop, one on February 4 and another on March 4. China retaliated with a 10% tariff against US imports to China, which also remains in place. But you may be asking, why is the fentanyl tariff still in place? The fentanyl issue in the United States is nothing to do with China. And you'd be 100% right. In fact, I detail that in my new book, the Woolmile Handbook, 20 Anti-China Lies Debunked, which is available worldwide on Amazon from May 15. But that's not the point. Firstly, because China's main demand to enter tariff negotiations was for Trump to remove all tariffs back to April 2, which doesn't include the fentanyl tariffs. And also because the two teams met in Switzerland over the weekend to discuss trade, not to discuss any issues outside of that. The fentanyl issue is outside the scope of discussions that were held over the weekend. Scott Bessent and US Trade Representative Jamieson Greer were not authorised to deal with that issue, and nor were they asked to. In terms of the Chinese side, the fentanyl tariff falls under the Public Security Ministry and not the Commerce Ministry. These are two quite different matters, and they'll be addressed in the weeks and months ahead, since now China and the US have decided to have closer talks, closer cooperation, and to set up a mechanism to keep these talks going. So for now, leaving the 20% additional fentanyl tariff is not at all a bad sign, because China already got everything they asked for out of the Trump administration. Does that make sense? Just to wrap it all up in a nice little bow, China told the US side that they'd only be willing to negotiate on tariffs if Trump's administration removed all tariffs that he levelled on April 2 and in the following days. That demand was met, with the US side doing exactly that. The remaining 30% and 10% tariffs are uneven, exactly because that is the level they were before April the 2nd. And in any event, the fentanyl matter, as well as other important issues, will be resolved over the coming weeks and months. So it's good news, you guys, and it has been a busy day, but hopefully world trade can start to get back to normal again as the world's two largest economies work out how to work together over the next 90 days. And on that note, that will be it for today, you guys. But as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so do let me know down below. Also, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really does help the channel. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.